It's a great honor to be able to host this seminar today with a talk by the Deputy Prime Minister of Mongolia, the Minister of Border Ports, and then the authors, myself and Dr. Elizabeth Fox, of a report about Mongolia on challenges and opportunities in 2023 going forwards. I'd like to thank all of those who've helped with compiling this report and for the event today. This will be recorded and will be available later, and so all of the comments will be on the record. There's a question and answer function, which is at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions as we go through this morning, then please post them and I will ask them at the end of the event to the relevant speaker. The report itself is available online and we'll post the link to that in the chat function. It was also sent in the invitation. Today's events will be that we will have comments on the current economic and political situation in Mongolia by the Mongolian Deputy Prime Minister, His Excellency Amarsiakhan. We will then have the Mongolian Minister for Border Ports, Bulgantuya, and we will then have the launch of the paper itself, and then comments by the Prime Minister's Trade Envoy for Mongolia, Mr. Daniel Kawczynski, MP, who I believe has just joined us, and then we will have opportunity for questions and answers. I would like to now introduce the Mongolian Deputy Prime Minister, Amarsiakhan. His Excellency Amarsiakhan graduated from Fresno City College in 1996, and the University of Utah in 1998, and Southwestern University in 2000. He majored in business administration and law and is fluent in English, Chinese, and Russian. His Excellency started his career as a technician at an information research center, and in 2000 to 2001, he was the executive director of the American Trade and Development Company. From 2001 to 2004, he was a consular officer and attaché at the Embassy of Mongolia in China, and then general director of the Uni and Dra Group. And in 2008, he was consultant to the board of directors of Hong Kong PTI Company. In 2016 and 17, he was head of the Budget, Finance and Economy Committee in the capital. And then in 2019, the head of the meeting of representatives of the capital, and then the governor of the capital and mayor of Ulaanbaatar. And in 2020, a member of the Parliament of Mongolia. In 2021, he was appointed as Deputy Prime Minister of Mongolia. He led the State Emergency Committee during the desperate times of the pandemic. He has 23 years of experience, including 15 years in public service. Over to you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Professor Khürelbaataryn, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to extend in advance to you warm greetings for a happy Lunar New Year, which is coming shortly. So taking this opportunity, let me express my gratitude for giving me a floor to speak on Mongolia's current economic and political situation. Though I am neither scholar nor researcher, I commend Professor Khürelbaataryn and Ms. Elizabeth Fox for their endeavor in undertaking such great studies on Mongolia, despite minor errors. So whatever happens in the world, not least in our region, tend to implicate on Mongolia, owing to globalization and interdependence. About global overview of our point, due to global warming, climate change, and ecological degradation, the frequency and intensity of unforeseen events have increased the challenge, as well as the geopolitical situations effect on our socioeconomic and interdependency. So economic developments. So it's been 3 years, as we all know, since the first case of the coronavirus were detected, and the pandemic has spread around the globe, causing millions of deaths, triggering unemployment, poverty, and transforming our daily lives are still lingering. So Mongolia's foreign policy, as you may already have heard and know, some difference during your research and studies. So let me point out several points. So we take regional and global stability seriously as they are pivotal to ensuring our sustainable growth and future prospects. We aim to maintain good relations with our international partners and also immediate neighbors, and actively promote third neighbor policy with countries and international bodies whom Mongolia seeks to develop enhanced economic ties. So it means we still seek to explore new markets in relation to tourism and trade of value-added goods and commodities, including education and cultural exchange. We read that the situation in Europe has deteriorated, and to the extent, and that it has, and we really want a swift end to this conflict. So Mongolia is a landlocked country, as you all know, but proud to be regional oasis in democratic norms and practices. So there are key projects which involve our neighbors, specifically the Sino-Russian gas pipeline currently under negotiation and probably will go on for implementation depending on the situation, but will ensure our future, part of our future energy security, and will help in our government's efforts to transition to more sustainable energy resources. So our transport infrastructure had hampered our foreign trade in raw materials with China. So to improve the situation, we will triple our cargo capacity at border ports, double the national railway capacity, and ensure that up to 3,000 kilometers of road network connect our border ports. So we will also double the number of active airports across the nation. So our northern neighbor has historically and continues to be an important economic partner for Mongolia. Nevertheless, we seek an enhanced economic independence, which requires a greater sense of energy security, transport, and infrastructure opportunities in domestic power generation. We share 13 checkpoints with China and have set a goal to increase this number, which will further broaden our trade with China. With China, Mongolia trading turnover is increasing by 38%. Our strategic partnership will ensure the coordination of our long-term development policies and objectives, such as the new recovery policy and Vision 2050, which you also had some sources in your report. The new recovery policy, we have identified 6 vulnerable points on the Mongolian economy, which currently deter foreign trade and investment. So these include, aged energy infrastructure, inadequate industrial and trade infrastructure, and also a city. Almost 69% of the population and 0.6% of land living on this 0.6% of the land. So it found migration from countryside, a lack of investment opportunities beyond Ulaanbaatar, By addressing such issues, Mongolia will become more attractive recipient of foreign trade investment, according to the current requirements, and also based on our new recovery policy implementation. Our new recovery policy represents 150 trillion or 49 billion US dollars. So of investment opportunity, and aims to create a robust and active economy with diverse components within 10 years. To deliver this on this ambition, Mongolia will actively improve its political, economic, and cultural relationship with nations across the globe by entering into enhanced bilateral and multilateral arrangements under our multi-pillar foreign policy. The Mongolian government is taking steps to attract FDI by setting up a foreign trade and investment agency and de-investing state-owned company shares at the Mongolian Stock Exchange. Sorry. A core aim of this administration is to tackle the issue of corruption and abuse of power. Mongolia is currently ranked 110th in the world on the corruption perception index. We need to see this become a two-digit number very quickly. That's our government's aim. For accomplishing this goal, we carry out 5-point actions program, such as encouraging whistleblowers against corruption, requesting public servants report their expense along with income, adhere to transparent accounting in budget units and political party financing, and also bring all fugitive to justice. So as said, the new recovery policy unveiled by the government is aiming to tackle significant economic constraints in relation to trade, liberalization, energy, economic growth, and efficient governance, with aim of making Mongolia one of the leading countries in Asia by 2050. So we have chosen to digitalize the delivery of public services, including issuance of exploration licenses, as part of our drive to improve the state efficiency. State efficiency is the most important part of our recovery policy. This will mean that the license also can be issued much quicker without red tape, and the government public service will be delivered without any bureaucracy or corruption issues. So there is another important aspect, and also part is the environmental protection, which is in middle of our concern. So around 50% of Mongolia will be home to wildlife havens and ecological resource centers. So our billion tree initiative will replant 600,000 hectares of Mongolian land to improve soil degradation and ensure improved carbon storage. In support of these efforts, the government also seeks to improve water use management and increase recycling. So we plan to invest in and promote each of our country's unique selling points. The Southwest will become a center of wind development. The Southeast will become a paleontological hub and a haven for our country's unique wildlife. The north of the country will be the country will be, promoting and also be designated as a manufacturing district. The suburbs of Ulaanbaatar will be transferred into a modern business center or cluster, we could say. So we will improve transport links to and from the capital with the introduction of a light railway system, which will also bring wealth to our suburbs, and this will help us to decentralize the current society of traffic congestion and air pollution and also unemployment. And there is also another issue of hydrogen. The government of Mongolia is working and has set a goal of creating energy independence and adding a new energy resource based on advanced technology in the new recovery policy. In this context, and given the abundant lignite reserves in Mongolia, the Prime Minister of Mongolia, expressed during his recent visit to Japan Mongolia's interest in participating in the experimental project to extract hydrogen from lignite. Mongolia-UK relationship, throughout the history of our diplomatic relations, UK has proven to be as one of our prominent third neighbor and an important partner in Europe. The government of Mongolia is fully committed to developing our relations with the United Kingdom in all areas in line with the interests and values of our two nations. So our bilateral trade and investment ties can be expanded within the new recovery policy framework. At the time of forthcoming visit by Amarsiakhan, MP and Minister of State in charge of Indo-Pacific of the Foreign and Commonwealth of Development Ministry of UK, partnership and cooperation agreement is expected to be signed. And during my visit, there were a number of interesting meetings were held, and we were very satisfied with the result of the meetings and also UK's commitment to improve and strengthen our bilateral relationship, including working on socioeconomic projects and development of Mongolian strategic projects by and through all means. So this is, I would like to emphasize during this seminar. And our bilateral trade and investment ties will be increased and strengthened rapidly. So Rio Tinto's mining operation at Oyu Tolgoi extracts from one of the largest known copper and gold deposits in the world, as you all know, and also helping support our economies, since the mine is owned jointly by the government of Mongolia and the Rio Tinto as part of an ongoing partnership. So both governments are quite satisfied with the cooperation of the mining project. So the Mongolian Oyu Tolgoi is expected to become the fourth largest copper producer in the world by 2030, producing around 500,000 tons of copper per year. The largest copper and gold deposit at the Oyu Tolgoi mean that sustainable extraction from the site will be a key part of enabling the transition to a low carbon economy, which will see significantly increased demand for copper in the coming years. The Mongolian government now basically is happy with the agreement reached in December 2021 regarding a debt incurred by Ernesto Tolga LLC. So this agreement set foundation for future cooperation and partnership with Rio Tinto at Oyu Tolga, in particular the commencement of underground mining operation to begin the first half of this year. The mining will be efficiently, especially the underground mining will be efficiently increased and also will unlock the most valuable part of the mine. Mongolia has vast natural resources, as you all know, including coal reserves. So coal reserve and it will remain an important part of Mongolia's economy, although we need to move efficiently to a more greener and also a safer future. However, as part of our new recovery policy, we are committed to transitioning Mongolia towards a green and environmentally friendly economy and making our contribution to global effort against the climate change. So we have continental climate, which means nearly 6 months of the year we have sub-zero temperature. Around 40% of Mongolia's fossil fuel-based energy infrastructure is beyond its useful life. We intend to build 2 new hydroelectric dams by 2030, and also coupled with solar farms and across the base of the across the west of the country. So Mongolia has expressed its interest in participating in experimental Japanese project to extract hydrogen from lignite, as you know, something we are well placed to do given the large lignite reserves in Mongolia. So you can see more data or information from our research studies or information provided from our partners from the region. So let me end my speech here, and I think we also have a time limit. So there are a number of issues that we can focus on and also talk in detail when needed. So if there is any questions or anything else that we need to emphasize during our seminar, I will be happy to answer. So our colleagues who are also participating in here will point out the other important issues included in the report, as well as from other resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. That was a very good comprehensive overview of Mongolia's current economic and geopolitical position. I'd now like to invite the Minister for Border Ports, Mongolia, Bulgantuya, Minister Her Excellency Bulgantuya. She graduated from the Huazhong University of Science and Technology, China, as an economist in 2006, and obtained her master's degree in International Economy and Development Economics from Yale University in 2008. She worked in large-scale worldwide organizations, including Oyu Tolgoi, the World Bank, and Petrovis until 2013. She was previously known as the Deputy Minister of Finance from 2016 to 2020, and was elected member of the Parliament in 2020 and appointed Minister for Border Control in 2022. So over to you, Minister Borgantuya.
Thank you, Professor Kerry Brown. Thank you, Professor, and Elizabeth Fox for authoring such an important report, Mongolia Challenges and Prospects in 2023. As Deputy Prime Minister has pointed out, Mongolia is a well-endowed country, especially in terms of mineral resources. Few things stand out as making Mongolia one of the most attractive investment destination in the region, given the fact that we're well endowed with mineral resources, firstly. Secondly, we have a very young and well-educated, vibrant population. Thirdly, located at a stable, growing region that attract FDI to the country.
Sorry, you're on mute. I'm sorry, you're on mute. You're still on mute. Just unmute at the bottom of the screen at the left-hand side.
Oh,
yeah, that's it.
Yes, sorry. Sorry. All right, we're back on. So one of the key points of the Vision 2050 and the new recovery plan is the border ports, the improvements that we're making to the border ports. 1/3 of our GDP is comprised of the mining sector, and over 90% of our exports are mineral resources. Given the fact that these are all exported through few borders of the country, that is to the south, the country has invested significantly to the border improvements. This includes connecting ports through road, rail, and air transport. Border ports will be fully connected by railway and paved roads, and improvements of the management and use of Mongolia's airspace and airways to increase number of transit flights and establishment of a freight forwarding hub. International exports are expected to increase by between 10 to 15% in 2023 as additional border ports are being opened up. A significant investment has been made to the biggest border port in the south, and openings have been made less than a month ago. We also expect that the government aims to increase border port capacity by threefold, increasing total exports value to $20 billion by 2030. The national railway network will double, as will the number of active airports in the country as well. The 313-kilometer railway between the Tavantogo coal formation and the Khürelbaataryn border point with China is expected to increase annual coal supply, transporting to 30 to 50 million tons per annum of coking coal to China. This will bring in significant investment, revenue to the budget, and also to the country as well. The railway increases the country's market with China and towards the eastern regions, and including ports. Improvement means of transport and broader access are expected to reduce transportation costs, allowing Mongolia to better compete with other coal and commodity suppliers within the region as well. Given that we're one of the least densely populated country in the region, investment in infrastructure can be quite costly. But given that there are major investments that are being done around the country, especially in the mining sector and also in the energy sector and industrial sector, investment in infrastructure is being economically viable now. According to Fitch Ratings, it is expected that medium-term GDP growth will exceed the average year-over-year GDP growth of 6.3%. In 2023, we expect that the economy will grow between 5 to 6%. And come 2024, GDP growth is expected to reach about 6.8%. And this is driven by OT underground mines' commencement of operations, alongside healthy, profitable commodity prices and the reopening of Chinese border points and high export demand. We expect that in 2023 that the commodity prices will continue to remain high and that the export is increasing significantly in the commodity sector. We realize that, especially given the fact that the economy is heavily reliant and the investment is also densely into the mining sector, that investment environment needs to be also investment, and the tax environment needs to be more favorable towards the mining sector. Mongolia has pretty favorable investment conditions, given that we have low tax rates and also a lower barrier to investment by foreign entities. Given that, especially in terms of coal, where the current coal reserve is about 10% of total world reserve. And in terms of the copper, we are the 4th largest now in the world in terms of the coal reserve, and less than 10% of the land mass is explored. And these are the estimations that we have made. We also have ample reserves of iron ore, gold, zinc, fluorspar, uranium, and oil. We have ensured that, especially in terms of investment and the tax environment of the country, is favorable for investment, both domestic and foreign. One of the also key pillars of the revitalization policy of the government is to ensure that, especially state-owned enterprises, are being restructured, and the privatization and public offerings are also being done for the state-owned enterprises as well. Quite recently, the Mongolian Stock Exchange of Mongolia and also the State Bank of Mongolia have made public offerings to ensure that these companies are also are operating transparently. Within this year, we are expecting that around 20 provincial road maintenance companies and also the telecommunication company and several other state-owned enterprises are being privatized and publicly being offered. In terms of the tax reforms that we have had in 2020, we have ensured that the lower tax for small and medium enterprises, we increased benchmark for corporate income taxes, progressive tax, and promoting raising funds at the financial market. In 2023, we expect that the tax base will increase with simplified regimes for SMEs. The government is also holding plans to ensure that the businesses that are operating in the countryside have favorable also tax conditions for expansion and operation into the other provinces of the country. The governance of the tax authority and governance of especially border port authorities are also being significant. We are making significant investment to ensure transparency, automation, and also digitalization. In 2023, especially in terms of the border port expansion, come March of 2023, we will be making significant investment to the Kawczynski border, which is the main export point for the coking coal and also for the OT copper, and also to some of the major ports where we have now railroads that have already reached to the border, and given that with China and Mongolia, we have the railway gauge difference, investments are being made to the infrastructure to ensure unloading and loading from one gauge to the other. We expect that this will increase export and also competitiveness of the country. Given that this we are given that within the new recovery plan, we are in terms of increasing the economic growth at a rate of at least 6%, and also double the per capita national income and increase labor force participation to 65%. We are happy to increase our cooperation with UK and expanding bilateral relations between Mongolia and UK. The Rio Tinto project of Oyu Tolgoi has become a flagship project between the two countries, and we expect that the export will increase to around 500 million tons of copper. Thank you very much, Professor.
Great, thank you very much for that overview of the current economic situation in Mongolia. I will, in a second, post the link to the report. It's already online, and I'm grateful for all of those who've helped. Sets out some of the current issues that have just been addressed by the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Border Ports. But I invite my co-author, Dr. Elizabeth Fox, who was in Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia in January this year, and is from the Mongolia Inter-Asian Studies Unit at Cambridge University, which is the main place of study of Mongolian issues in Britain, probably Europe, in order to set out the key findings of the report and some of the recommendations. So Dr. Fox, thank you much.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to start by thanking my co-writer, Professor Kerry Brown, and the organizers of this event for inviting me to introduce this report. I'd like to say I'm eternally grateful to all the Mongolians who have participated with my research since 2012, and in particular the ministers and experts who took the time to meet with me in Ulaanbaatar in January and shared their thoughts. I was offered the chance to participate in the writing of this report by Miyasu and thank them for the opportunity. The purpose of the paper, as Kerry and others have said, is to outline the prospects and challenges facing Mongolia in 2023. As such, the report provides a broad overview. It can't contain everything, but we hope it provides a broad overview of the current economic, social, and political situations in Mongolia. And with its publication, our aim is to raise public awareness of Mongolia in the UK, in Europe, and around the world. A higher profile for Mongolia on the global stage should increase the interest of the international community to engage with Mongolia and open opportunities for collaboration with Mongolian businesses. The light that this report shines on the current situation in Mongolia has two effects. On the one hand, it highlights the many positive things Mongolia has to be proud of, and on the other hand, we can use this light to also look into the shadows. Of course, it's not always comfortable to look into dark places, but the hope is that by shining a light on these areas, we can bring about changes that will allow the whole place to shine. When it comes to Mongolia, the report begins with a key fact, which is Mongolia is a democracy. It's famously referred to as an oasis of democracy, originally by John Kerry, and Mongolia stands out in its region where it is surrounded by autocracies and failed democracies. Next, Mongolia has only two geographical neighbors, which are Russia and China. And being wedged between these two giants, maintaining a sovereign territory the size of Western and Central Europe, and having a population of only 3.4 million people, it's quite an extraordinary position for a country to be in. And Mongolia has become accustomed to navigating its geopolitical reality over the last century, and democracy has been a key to this. It facilitates Mongolia's third neighbor policy, which you've heard a little about already. Given Mongolia's geopolitical position and thinking realistically about the country's military capacities, it makes sense to try to raise international awareness about Mongolia, its people, and its culture. It's in Mongolia's interests for as many people as possible to know that it is an independent, democratic, sovereign nation, and long may it be that way. In the long term, some of the greatest challenges facing Mongolia may not be political or geopolitical, but may be due to the vulnerability of the country's precious and unique ecosystems to climate change. Mongolia has already warmed an average of over 2 degrees Celsius and has seen reduced rainfall since 1940. Globally speaking, not enough is being done to tackle the climate crisis, but there's also clearly a lack of local awareness and urgency regarding the ways in which Mongolia will be disproportionately affected by global temperature increases and more frequent extreme weather events. As such, we feel it's imperative that Mongolia, one, prioritize the protection of its environment in economic policy making, and two, recognize the opportunities that green growth would provide in the medium and long term. In the short term, there is one big issue Mongolia needs to focus on, and that's corruption. As we can see, Mongolia's corruption perceptions rating has been sliding down over recent years. Unlike the Democracy Index, where Mongolia ranks above its regional neighbors with regards to perceptions of corruption, Mongolia is lagging behind the Asia-Pacific regional average of 45. The end of 2022 saw a series of corruption scandals that led to significant protests on the streets of Ulaanbaatar. It's important to note that Mongolians are free to demonstrate and protesters were not met with violence, but there are significant public concerns about how endemic the problem of corruption is in Mongolia. As the report outlines, Mongolia is well aware of the challenge institutionalized corruption poses for the country's future as a regional beacon of democracy and human rights. The current administration has introduced new measures to fight corruption and incentivize whistleblowing. So there are certainly reasons to be hopeful that the political and public wills to tackle corruption are moving into alignment. As the report discusses, Mongolia is facing a series of challenges. These include air pollution, traffic and infrastructure, and underemployment, the dangers posed by climate change, and legal double standards where the law may not be equally applied to those in power and those who are not powerful. The report also concludes with some recommendations. These include making Ulaanbaatar more livable, addressing rural-urban imbalances, maintaining the third neighbor policy, increased economic diversification, the equitable and intelligent use of natural resource revenues, and a green investment plan. And in many ways, our report echoes the issues the Mongolian government itself has identified as barriers to development in its new recovery policy. And the new recovery policy also contains promising proposals. It will just be a matter of whether they can actually be implemented. In the context of seeking to raise the profile of Mongolia on the international stage, I would just like to draw attention to the first recommendation, making Ulaanbaatar more livable. It's clear that it will be hard to attract foreigners or convince the brightest and best Mongolians to remain in the country without addressing Ulaanbaatar's issues. Serious investment into alternative forms of heating and public transport infrastructure is imperative. Today, being February, those who are there and those who have been there will know that Ulaanbaatar is still blanketed in smog at levels that remain seriously hazardous to health. The smoke is coming from different sources, big and small, power plants, household stoves, car exhaust pipes, but it affects every single person in the city, no matter how big, rich, poor, young or old they are. I would urge the government to not only tackle the air pollution, but also think about the other issues facing Mongolia, such as corruption, increasing inequality and poverty in the same way as issues that affect everyone. In just a few days, Mongolia will celebrate Sainbuyan, the Lunar New Year, and after a long cold winter, the days will start to get longer and warmer. But it's clear that Mongolia has great potential, vast natural resources, a small, educated, young population, land, sun, 70 million head of livestock, and a rich linguistic and cultural heritage. So if Mongolia can strive to maintain democracy and rule of law, it's our hope and feeling that it has a very bright future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And the link to the report should be sent to everyone. I hope that you can read it and give us any feedback you have. So very finally, I'm very grateful to have Mr. Daniel Kawczynski, the Prime Minister's envoy to Mongolia. Daniel was born in Warsaw in Poland in 1972 and moved to Britain with his parents, age 5, to join relatives already settled here. His maternal grandfather fought in the Battle of Britain. He was educated at St George's College in Wadebridge and joined the Conservative Party at 13, graduating in business studies with language at Stirling University, where he was the chair of the Conservative Association. He worked at an international account manager in telecommunications for 10 years, promoting British interests, British business in Africa and the Middle East. And then was first elected as Member of Parliament for Shrewsbury and Ascham in 2005 general election. He has sat on the Foreign Affairs, International Development, Justice and Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committees, and was previously the Parliamentary Private Secretary for the Secretary of State for Wales. He served as an advisor to the Prime Minister David Cameron, as an envoy to the Polish and Eastern European diaspora in the United Kingdom, and he was appointed the Prime Minister's Trade Envoy to Mongolia in October 2020. So an important voice on Mongolia British issues. Over to you, Mr. Kawczynski.
Thank you very much, Professor Brown, for that introduction. And of course, may I just start off by saying that how pleased I was as the trade envoy to meet with His Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister, Amarsiakhan, earlier this year at the Dorchester Hotel, where we celebrated the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the United Kingdom and Mongolia. The room was packed, wasn't it, Your Excellency, demonstrating just how popular and increasingly interest that is taking place on both sides in terms of cementing and working on bilateral relations. We're very proud that we were the first European country to formally recognize Mongolian sovereignty at that time. But of course, as has already been said by Professor Brown, I was born in Poland, in communist Poland. I'm the only Conservative Member of Parliament, in fact, the only Member of Parliament here in the British Parliament who was born in a Soviet satellite state, a communist society, which was, in my view, politically Orwellian and economically illiterate, where the press had no rights, and it was a totally Orwellian state. And so I think very differently. I'm a hybrid. I'm an Anglo-Pole. And so I think very differently to many of my other colleagues here who were born in the United Kingdom and have only known this socially liberal Western democracy type of system. And so it was very interesting for me to have been appointed as the trade envoy to Mongolia, bearing in mind that Mongolia, of course, had the unfortunate position, as Poland had, of being subjugated to a communist system in the Comecon system and all that it entailed. And so, of course, democracy is a very important thing for me, and it's also a very important thing for the Mongolians. And I'm delighted that the British government has recognized the importance of our partnership with fellow democracies, finding those democratic partners around the world, particularly in the region as Mongolia finds herself in, where she is surrounded by what I would argue are jurisdictions which perhaps do not respect the normal type of rule of law and international norms that we've come to expect and recognize here in the United Kingdom. We celebrate the democracy of Mongolia, and on my visits to Ulaanbaatar, I have been very heartened from what I have seen by the way in which democracy functions there, the freedom of the press, and the interaction of politicians with the wider electorate. And I think, as has already been stated, Mongolia is a beacon of democracy in that area. Of course, it's already been referenced that there is vast mineral wealth in Mongolia, and I had the privilege of visiting the Oyu Tolgoi mine on my first visit in the Gobi Desert. Very proud of the fact that this British Anglo-Australian investment, $14 billion investment in Mongolia, I very much hope is just the start of an expansive partnership of British mining technical expertise in conjunction with our Mongolian partners. But very proud of the fact that when I visited the mine, I believe 97% of all employees are Mongolian. And that mine has won international awards about some of the environmental standards that it's operating on. We must be very cognizant of the fact that we are operating in this beautiful country and must always protect the environment from all the mining operations that take place. But it's not just enough for us to mine in Mongolia in conjunction with our Mongolian partners. We now have to bring in processing industries, expertise in processing rare earth minerals into magnets directly in Mongolia. Give the Mongolians that extra value add. We all know that it's difficult to compete against the Chinese in terms of pounds, shillings, and pence. Where we will compete with the Chinese is by demonstrating to the Mongolians that we want to bring our processing expertise to that jurisdiction, work hand in glove with our Mongolian partners to ensure that we are increasing value add in raw materials into finished products, and enabling our Mongolian partners to be less dependent and less reliant on the stranglehold from the Chinese and the Russians. So we're very proud that the Mongolians call us a third-party neighbor. How you can be described as a neighbor thousands of miles away is a point for debate. But I think the Mongolians are very serious about it, and so are we. And we intend to demonstrate over the coming years that you do not need to be physically next to one another in order to be neighbors. And in this world where technology is facilitating a much faster methodology of air cargo and transport, we intend to demonstrate that we can be neighbors. Lastly, may I just say, because I'm very keen to potentially take questions, may I just say that I am absolutely convinced that only 7% of the mineral wealth of Mongolia has been explored. I am absolutely convinced that Mongolia will become the United Arab Emirates of mineral wealth in our lifetimes. The sheer opportunities that exist in this country, and with the small population, I have every confidence that with the right partnership in place, Mongolia can become one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And now that we have voted for Brexit, this year we are joining the CPTPP, the world's largest trading bloc, incorporating Japan, South Korea, Australia, and others. So there's an inevitable pivot that will take place away from this overarching concentration on our own small continent. Inevitably, we will be looking for greater collaboration with CPTPP partners, and instinctively, of course, Mongolia is in that neighborhood. And finally, what I'd like to say is this. I had the great pleasure and privilege of hosting His Excellency for fish and chips in the House of Commons dining room after our discussions. And I said to him, would you please do me the pleasure of visiting the JCB dealer in Ulaanbaatar? I don't know whether he has had the opportunity, but I'm taking the chance now to remind him of that invitation. Jerry,
well, we contacted him, sorry, and I will be visiting them next week. Yeah.
Marvelous. I'm thrilled because Jerry, the Mongolian, and his wife, who run the JCB partnership in Ulaanbaatar, if anybody wants to understand what is happening in terms of Anglo-Mongolian cooperation, they need to visit the JCB operations in Ulaanbaatar. And I'm delighted that His Excellency has made contact and will be visiting them next week. I asked the owners of JCB, how is it conceivable that they have managed to grow the market share that they have? By the way, as you know, JCB make all the machinery relevant for the mining industry, diggers and excavators and all the rest of it. I asked them, how is it conceivable that you have gone from 0% to over 20% of the market share of these products in Mongolia over such a short period of time? And he said to me, and you will see it for yourself, because I went to a groundbreaking ceremony there where I was opening the start of a new expansion of the whole site last year. He said two things. First of all, it's the sheer quality of the British products, the durability and quality of the manufactured goods, but also the extraordinary after-sales service that we get. And so our Mongolian interlocutors can buy a much cheaper Chinese version, but they have decided, having tested these products, that the quality and durability and the after-sales service from the British side actually makes the products far more cost-effective. So I'm obviously very proud of that. The Chinese are very good at selling cheap products, but it is, I would always argue, British products that are actually longer term better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kawczynski. It's stirring words. So, and I'm sure next time we're in Ulaanbaatar, we will look up this company being successful there. So thank you very much indeed. So now we have some question and answers. We've already got 3. If there are any others, then please do put them in the question and answer function. The first is to thank the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for the presentation. It's from Clement Vaccarella. They say, I understand that Mongolia, like many other countries, has struggled to secure enough fertilizers for its domestic needs in recent years. Does the government of Mongolia have plans to develop a domestic nitrogen fertilizer industry? If I might come to the second one also, it's about plans for further educational and cultural exchanges with other countries. Are these plans being structured or used so as to help the future employment of Mongolian citizens in the industry? So the fertilizer industry and education in the mining industry. If I might ask the first question to His Excellency, Mr. Amarsiakhan, and maybe the second to Her Excellency, the Minister Bulgantuya. So for the first on the nitrogen fertilizer industry.
Well, thank you, Professor. Yeah, Mongolia is fairly dependent on fertilizer. Although we have great resource and huge potential in agribusiness, this sector is just opening up. So at the same time, we need new technologies, advanced technologies, and also we need to bring in more expertise from countries around the world who has this knowledge of improving and developing agricultural business in Mongolia. So we have vast territory with huge resource in this sector, and one of Mongolian government's recovery policy is aiming to develop our agricultural sector. And the President and Prime Minister of Mongolia have emphasized and also expressed their position and also set a very ambitious goal to produce supply its agricultural products by itself, and also intend to export as much as possible in a short period of time by setting a very ambitious goal to rapidly develop this agricultural sector, including, planting and growing all the possible, green vegetables and grains and different foodstuffs. So this is why we also need to focus on updating and upgrading the machineries and equipments we use, including setting up our own fertilizer, plant. So we import most of the fertilizers either from Russia or China, including this nitrogen fertilizer. So you could assume that we are almost dependent on import of fertilizers, except some very limited amount of production of natural fertilizer for some plants, but nothing else. So yes, we are interested in this bringing more advanced technology and plants to produce it on our own.
Thank you very much. And for the second question, Her Excellency Bulgantuya, Minister Bulgantuya.
Yes. In terms of educational and cultural exchanges, the Minister of Culture and the Minister of Education are structuring the plans right now. And this includes making English language the second language of Mongolia. Especially during the Soviet era, the second language has been Russian. And within the last 20 years or so, we have had huge interest of learning English and making the country the second language. The education reform bill is right now in Parliament to make the English language the second language. In terms of the mining sector and exchanging labor force in the mining sector, Mongolian mining sector is, even though investment is heavily from the foreign entities, majority of the people who are working in the mining sector are Mongolians. According to the law, 90%, there's a ratio of 90-10%, 90-10, 90% of those being employed in the mining sector have to be a Mongolian labor force, 10% maximum of foreign. And this has been well met by foreign investors, and especially from my experience of having worked with Rio Tinto and the Oyu Tolgoi project, Mongolian companies have already built capacity up to international standard in the mining sector. And now some of the companies are actually operating in other projects that are being highly recommended by their counterparts, and with the OT project to work in Southeast Asia, in Africa region, and also in Australia as well. So yes, there is we having built the capacity, we would be happy to have the exchanges in terms of cultural and education, also expanding into the mining sector as well.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Mr. Kawczynski is there, because I just wanted to ask a question about the business opportunities for solar panels.
I'm so sorry. I haven't worked out, would you believe, how to share. I'm so
Right.
technologically illiterate. I still don't know how to share things in the webinar chat. And
we did see the thing that you shared, the newspaper article, I think, on the business opportunities. We did see that.
Because I wanted everybody to see that. There's a brilliant article in the Telegraph this week, which just really encapsulates all the tremendous opportunities that exist in Mongolia. I just wanted to make sure everybody, I've just got my senior assistant to try and put it in. So can you see it? Is that all right?
We did see it. Yes, we did indeed see it. And thank you very much for that. So this relates to that, Mr. Kawczynski. It's about one of the recommendations for the report is installations of solar panels for households and business. I mean, do you think that there's an opportunity in the UK for that kind of business with Mongolia? Do you see that? Have you heard about that? Or is this really something that should be for others?
Well, what I would say is that we are, without going into too many details, I mean, we are in very extensive discussions with His Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Mongolian government about all sorts of very strategically important economic opportunities, which will help Mongolia become a more energy efficient and self-reliant. That is extremely important. I think if we've learned of anything in Eastern Europe, in Poland, and in other countries, being dependent on Russian gas and energy is a very dangerous thing. We have seen how the Russians have used gas supplies and energy supplies to blackmail and intimidate countries in Eastern Europe. The Poles were the first country, when I went to Poland 7 years ago, where they were talking about the need to build liquefied gas terminals on their coastline in the Baltic and import energy from Norway, a fellow NATO partner, because of their concerns about how President Putin has used the extraordinary vast energy supplies in Russia as a tool with which to blackmail or intimidate countries. So we don't want Mongolia to be in that position. So of course, without going into too many details, without revealing too many of our bilateral discussions, of course, that's a very important element of what we want to support the Mongolians on. The second thing I'd say very quickly, very briefly, is I saw a question there, I think, from one of your questionnaires about Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and others. May I just make a quick point on that, which is we are going to be now, for the coming years and decades, in a Herculean battle of wills between ourselves and the Russians and the Chinese over influence. There is no doubt about it. And whether it's Mongolia or whether it's Kazakhstan or whether it's Uzbekistan or whether it's Kyrgyzstan or any of those countries in that area which are sandwiched between Russia and China, they will find themselves in a almost unique situation. I was giving an interview to the Kazakhstan press the other day, and I'm going to be meeting with representatives of Kazakhstan later this week, the message seems to be the same. Whether you're talking to the Kyrgyzstan officials, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, or Uzbekistan, which is this: we are very cognizant of the increasing power and strength of Russia and China, and in the way that they are conducting themselves in our region. We have our own geopolitical sensitivities that perhaps you may not be fully cognizant of, being perched on the extreme western fringes of the continent of Europe in that fortunate position that we find ourselves in. But nevertheless, we want to work with you as a partner to make sure that we do not become over-dependent and over-reliant on these two powers. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity for the United Kingdom, because if there's one thing that we do feel very strongly about, and that is the rules-based system and the rule of law and democratic principles. I'm reading a book at the moment about how democracies around the world have been attacked and are under threat. We take our democracy for granted in the United Kingdom. That is not the case around the world. And we have a duty and responsibility to work with countries like Mongolia and Kazakhstan to make sure that those embers of democracy, which were sparked after the fall of the Soviet Union, are given maximum oxygen, and that we support these countries as best as we can to make sure that the seeds of democracy that were planted in the early 1990s are supported and never allowed to be extinguished.
Thank you very much. It's a very important point. So finally, a couple of questions. One to the Deputy Prime Minister from Professor Bulag at Cambridge University. This is about international standards and national standards. In a programme, Dr. Bulag says that the Deputy Prime Minister carried out from his time as Mayor of Ulaanbaatar. He stressed international standards. This is necessary because Mongolia is becoming an importer, not just an importer, but an exporter. However, a recent exchange with the Minister of Justice, if Dr. Bulag remembers correctly, he argued to the effect that international standards are more important than national laws. What do you think the position of Mongolia is on this? How do national laws kind of need to change or need to be supported to support the new export-driven economy? And how does the government intend to resolve the conflict between laws and standards, between national and international laws and standards? So that would be for the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Amarsiakhan.
Well, very important question and important topic. During my visit, I had a range of discussions with His Excellency MP and Prime Minister Envoy Daniel Kawczynski, and also the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Justice, including Her Excellency Anne Trevelyan. So I pointed out this importance of having very efficient adoption of international standard into our country. Because the government of Mongolia, we are working towards aggressively to be in line with international standard and have all sectors, whether it's agricultural or mining or trading or manufacturing, we all have to comply with the international standard. Because it is becoming, this issue is becoming not only in Mongolia, all around the world, it is becoming more an issue and more serious topic, because the world population is growing so fast, and the demand for different sorts of products and goods are increasing, but the supply has been declined, especially during the past 3 years or pandemic, which is still lingering around. So almost all countries are in economic recession and social disputes and problems. So the government of Mongolia stands for its people. And we have to stand with our people for their well-being and safety. So as a Deputy Prime Minister who is directly in charge of this standard and measurement in the nation, among my other agencies, so I am focusing and giving very, strong importance to this issue, and wanted to work with the UK Standard Organization to work together to build capacity building and also increase extend the cooperation between our two nations through standard adoption and also exchange experience and ideas.
Thank you very much. And then just very finally for Dr. Fox, my co-author, there's some questions really about the kind of political, you see the kind of political issues within Mongolia. One questioner asks about Mongolia's potential in the past 30 years. There's been a lot of progress, but there have been some delays to key investment policies, and this has been created by disagreements and deadlocks in Mongolia's Great Khürel. Is there a risk that the current aims to attract investment will also be derailed by similar political disagreements, logjams, or do you feel more optimistic? So just for Elizabeth, and then maybe I could invite the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister to also comment on this. So first of all, Dr. Fox, and then the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister. Elizabeth.
Thank you. I think, of course, there's always a risk that political logjams can stand in the way of progress. Honestly, I feel I probably am not the most qualified compared to the other panelists to speak on this. So I would pass the question on. And
Great, thank you. So for the Deputy Prime Minister, His Excellency, Mr. Amarsiakhan Sainbuyan.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, Mongolia is sandwiched between these two massive neighbors. So having free trade and also improving its infrastructure and growing its economy or solving its socioeconomic issues for Mongolian government is always a challenge, especially considering the late escalation of this regional and international disputes and issues, as we all know. Just dealing with the pandemic for almost 2 or 3 years and aiming to solve the post-pandemic economic and social issues. We've had this Russian and Ukraine war issues, which made things much harder and complicated for Mongolia. And balancing the foreign relation and the activities for our government is not so easy, but based on our multi-pillar foreign policy and also with our concept of third neighbor policy, the government of Mongolia is doing its best to maintain peaceful and good relationship with all our neighbors, including our 2 immediate neighbors and third neighbor. So as you know, UK is one of our principal third neighbor and very essential partner in Europe. And we also appreciate the UK's commitment for giving, enhancing its policy on Indo-Pacific region and also supporting and focusing on developing countries like Mongolia to strengthen its relationship. So yes, it's not very easy, and also in terms of trade, we are focusing on to create, invest, create, and also develop. That's our government's policy, while maintaining a good relationship with our neighbors. And this is the reason, that's why we are investing more into our creative industries and creative infrastructure and built over 1,000 kilometers of railway on our own and with our own resources during the pandemic. So, and is still working on to develop our infrastructure for having more trade and open up more markets and improve and encourage our people-to-people ties with our immediate and third neighbors. So.
Thank you very much. And then the final question, beyond the one that I just asked for the Minister, Borgantuya, also about the relations, obviously, with Russia at the moment, the economic and infrastructure cooperation. How does the kind of government review this? So this is for the final question. So the Minister for Border Ports, Bulgantuya Khürelbaataryn. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Professor. I also wanted to comment that I realized and we recognize that within the last 30 years, we have had so much opportunities which we probably did not seize in time. But at the same time, I remember starting working for OT back in 2010, right after the signing of the investment agreement. The country had not fully recognized the importance of foreign direct investment and also the importance of the mining sector at that time. Since then, we have went through a boom and a bust cycle. Back in 2011, the economy was growing at about 17.3%. I guess at that time, we thought that this economic growth will persist probably for several decades in a row. However, back in 2014, with the falling of the commodity prices, the economy fell and bringing in lowering macroeconomic indicators of the country. It was increasing back in 2018 and 19, and again hit by COVID, and once again by the Russia-Ukraine war. So about a decade ago, even some of the government institutions would approach the foreign direct investment and also the mining sector sometimes more personally than professionally. And now, after a decade of having attracted investment, foreign direct investment, and also being heavily reliant on the mining sector, I think people have now recognized the importance of the foreign investment and also the importance of the mining sector and also the industrial sector on the economy and the well-being of the people. However, at the same time, to ensure that such political decisions do not become the roadblock for foreign investment, the country needs to take several steps, which is also being reflected into Vision 2050 and also to our policies as well. This is number one, to support responsible mining. Number two, to reduce corruption. And number three, to increase transparency at the same time as well. And these are efforts that are being tackled right now by the government of Mongolia. In your report, you have mentioned that the rail gauge question, it became intensely politicized. There were fears of national security, and all these is now, right now, we have built railroads all the way to the border, and unloading and loading facilities have already been built in some of the major ports of the country, addressing the question of national security and the importance that the investment and the mining sector also plays to the country as well. So this is one. Number two, in terms of trade with Russia, around 90% of our trade with Russia is petroleum goods, oil and gas. And Mongolia is still heavily reliant on oil and gas from Russia. Even though we have large crude oil reserves, the refinery is under construction. And once, until it is built, the country will still continue to be reliant on oil and gas from Russia at the same time as well. But at the same time, the country has is aiming to become a transit corridor between these two large economies, and investments are being made in terms of roads, building roads, improving also borders and ports, also to the north to Russia as well, given that we're a landlocked country between the two big countries.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm very grateful to His Excellency Amarsiakhan, Her Excellency Mr. Border Ports, Bulgantuya, to the Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister's Trade Envoy for Mongolia, Daniel Kawczynski, to my fellow author, Dr. Elizabeth Fox at the Mongolia in Asian Studies Unit at Cambridge. The report is available online, and I hope that it's helpful to understand the importance of this relationship. As we've heard today, there are many aspects of it. It has enormous political and economic importance for Britain and for Britain's relationships in Asia generally. So it's an extremely important relationship. I am very grateful to everyone's participation today, particularly my colleagues at the King's College for arranging and facilitating this meeting. It will be available online so that more can listen and be able to share the insights that we've been able to hear today. Thank you very much indeed, and it's been great to work with you all. Thank you very much.